But since our club is growing so rapidly, and it's really very possible that some of you are new to the community, let me just tell you a little bit about Alfie Oakes. I myself am still pretty new to the area, but I can tell you the first community leader I remember learning about from my realtor before I even moved here was Alfie Oakes. Alfie Oakes is a farmer, businessman, and politician. A born entrepreneur, Alfie grew the family business from the ground up. He is the founder of Oakes Farms, one of the largest independently owned agribusiness operations in South Florida. Headquartered here in Collier County, Oakes Farms maintains a diversified portfolio of services that reach a global market, including farming, packing, shipping, processing, retail markets, food service, and seafood distribution. If you somehow haven't had a chance to go to see the table, then you have an experience coming like none other. It is the flagship of Oakes Farms retail operation and a 78,000 square foot destination market in North Naples. Alfie Oakes now employs over 3,500 people and is known as a leader who values his relationships with employees, vendors, and customers, and doing right by people. Alfie Oakes hosts Patriot Talk Show, a popular weekly podcast which is broadcast live from seat to table. He has been a strong voice against mask mandates since 2020, and he currently serves as Collier County as state committee man for the Republican Party of Florida. He hosts many speakers, candidates, and public events at his farms, and we at WRC are extremely grateful that he has welcomed our ballot petition and voter registration tables at his venues. Alfie is known as a fighter for and defender of our God-given rights to liberty and freedom, expression and exchange, to preserve America for the future. I think we can count on him having something interesting to say. Let me also thank Deanne Oakes for being with us today, and would you please help me in warmly welcoming Alfie Oakes.
Great to see everyone today. It's funny that so many realtors come in to see the table and they tell me the first place that they take everyone is to see the table, and I've had it's actually flattered by hundreds of people that said that they moved here specifically because of See the Table. And I say this because if you go back about 2 years ago, the move we made at that time was somewhat bold in saying that we're never gonna buy into this nonsense. And immediately the next day, the Naples Daily News came out and said that because of See the Table, no one was going to move to Naples. That's what they said. I can pull the article up. You can't make it up, right? So time has served us well, and there's more people than we could ever imagine moving to Naples. And it's not because of See the Table. It's because of our Governor DeSantis. There's so many things that I can talk about, and I can only tell you that I'd like to take some Q&A time. We have that microphone, isn't it? So, well, how much time do we have total? So I'll try to figure out how much.
5 hours. 3 years.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit, and we'll get into Q&A. But I never could have imagined that I would be on this, farmer, grocer, a guy that really, my only position was to stand up for what I thought was right. It was that simple. I never thought that I'd be, in the last week I've been with Rudy Giuliani and Secretary of State Pompeo and Ben Carson and General Flynn became a really good friend of mine. I never thought all this would happen. It wasn't planned, and I don't even really push it. It just kind of gravitates to when you're out there doing the right thing. And I feel honored to be in the company of such great people. But I've learned so much, and when I share any of my information with everybody, sometimes I'm wrong. But I'm telling you what I feel, it's what I believe at the moment. And it's not without a lot of thought that went into it. No different than when I decided that the masking was not going to be beneficial for my employees. And I certainly allowed every employee that wanted to mask, or someone that did fear. Hello. Okay. So anybody that felt afraid or didn't, that's the America that we live in. I also took a very strong stance against the Black Lives Matter. Now, it was somewhat unpopular at the time. My daughter received death threats. Unfortunately, she was in 11th grade, and she had, kids were posting things online that had racist across her face and everything. She had never been called a racist before. I had never been called a racist before. And obviously, the reason that I was against Black Lives Matter had nothing to do with being racist. It was because I knew what funded Black Lives Matter. I knew where they came from, and I knew what their intent was. And their intent was not to bring us together as Americans, but to divide us. And we but we've been right about most things. If you ask my wife, I'm right most of the time. Even these things that I see going on in Ukraine, and I've been trying to dig in a little bit. I think that Putin is a bad man. I do. I do believe that. But I do believe that Putin, we share a bit of a common enemy that doesn't make Putin any better of a person, but that common enemy is this one world globalist New World Order. And that certainly doesn't make Putin my friend, but I think that even China, as much as we don't like China, I think that China's against this. And I think the biggest threat that I see right now to our country is this globalism. And the money has been flowing into DC, and you can see the way that it's been happening for years. And unfortunately, they're using this money to change policy on every side. And believe it, they're pumping the money into a lot of Republicans. And I blame a lot of what has happened in our country on Republicans that didn't stand up when they should have been really strong. You know that a lot that happened with the election process was illegal, and they allowed it to happen, and they stood back and were weak. And we can't go back. We're not looking to go back, but we're looking to learn from our mistakes. I've been broke 3 times in my life. I make mistakes, I learn from them though. To say that you can't learn from them is what's insane. If someone was to tell me that we can't learn from our mistakes, or to shun us when we're, to even speak about that we had election integrity issues. I mean, none of the main networks can even talk about election integrity issues for threat of being sued by Dominion or even Newsmax. They won't even talk about it because for those reasons, and that's sad. That's not the America that I grew up in. When I made the bold statements against BLM, I had a lot of people on the other side of the aisle that worked for me at Seat the Table, but we didn't lose them because I had conversations with every one of them, and some of them were upset. They're like, I don't like to be grouped in with you. Everyone knows what you stand for. I'm like, well, that is what I stand for. That's not what you have to stand for. And I told every employee, if you want to come when BLM comes to the store and you want to be on that side, that's perfectly fine with me. Peaceful protests in America, to think different, that's the America I grew up in. That's the America that I love. And you're not going to get treated any different if you're out on that side. I'm still going to give you a hug when you come in. I'm still going to respect you. As long as you do your job, there's going to be no retaliation for what you think. I might think that you might have a lot of growing up to do or a lot of learning to do, but that's not going to change the way that I feel about you as an employee. And we have Food and Thoughts, an all organic store. Another thing that I don't like is somehow the liberals try to commandeer healthy eating. That's such a crop. There's nothing more of a conservative value of putting healthy food into your body so that you don't have to be dependent on anyone else, on a pharmaceutical company, putting healthy things into the soil. It's a very conservative value, and we're going to work hard to try to at least take that back to the conservative side here. But there's been an awakening right now, is what we're, when we look at all the things that we would consider bad, and I think that every bad thing that ever happened in my life has been a blessing. Everything. There's good in all of it, and I believe that we won the 2020 election. I sincerely believe that. I think there's a lot of states that made a lot of mistakes, but I think right now it's got people awake. I think as big of a tragedy as COVID was, and making these children not be able to interact and go to school, it was a terrible thing. But the good thing is they came home, and a lot of parents got to see this trash that was going on with the CRT and everything that they were indoctrinating our children with. So that was bad, but what's the good that came out of it? The good that came out of it is all of the domestic terrorists now that are going to the school boards all over the country trying to straighten things out. So I became friends with Tucker Carlson, and we communicate quite often. And he's asked me to come shoot. I don't know what day I'm going to be on Tucker, but I know that I'm going to film. I'm going to film the Tucker show on the 19th of this month. So that's the day that I'm going to film it. I don't know when it's going to air. Depending on how much trash I talk, maybe it'll never air. I don't know. But the premise there is actually food security and what's going on with farming. And I have a lot of knowledge in that. If you ever go to see the table, you might see there's a picture upstairs that's got me back when I had 80s hair, big head of hair. And I'm sitting with a gentleman there. His name's Blaine Hitchens, amazing young farmer. In that picture, I think he was probably about 22 years old. But he's one of the biggest chicken farmers up in Delaware. And as soon as I heard the Cincinnati going on, we had a 400% increase on the cost of chicken that's happened. And maybe some of you know it, maybe some of you don't know it, but that's a 400% increase that we've seen. Eggs are, by next week, going to have a 400% increase over the last seven weeks. And I asked him, you always like to go to someone that knows, someone that's in the industry. And he's explaining to me that he's not getting any more money for his chicken. He's not getting any more money for his eggs, and there's really not that huge of a shortage. That they're kind of taking advantage of the situation. And we've seen the same thing with beef. And what's happening is, when it kind of goes back to this whole globalism thing. Get cutting out there. So there's companies that have bought up. You've all probably heard of BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. These guys. There's 7 companies now that are controlling 88% of the financial boards of the major corporations in this country, and that's scary. I'm a free enterprise guy. That's why I fight every day for America, because I grew up poor. I grew up, my first employee. We're talking about employees. My first employee started with me when I was 15 and he was 14 on the Cape Cod Bridge. He's still with me right now for 37 years, and we have a lot of employees that have been with us for a long time. I fight because of the American dream and because of the free enterprise system, and I believe that a lot of people here are old enough to know Milton Friedman and understand the economic policy that he stood for, his philosophy. I believe firmly in that there's nothing that's ever lifted people out from the masses of poverty into a very stable middle and upper class like the United States. But this kind of crony capitalism and this all-powerful capitalism, where you have State Street and BlackRock and Vanguard that own so much and control so much and can manipulate so much, because that's what's happening right now. This is not normal inflation. This is manipulation of our food supply. And we're seeing it like I've never seen it before. Personally, I can speak to my farm input costs are up around 250%. And this is insane. This is not inflation. Inflation is up 19-20%. Our input costs across the board are up in amounts that are going to stop me. They're going to prohibit me from farming next season to a large degree. So I've never backed up in my life. When I was a first generation farmer, I started when I was 19 years old. I made a lot of mistakes, went totally broke by the time I was 24, was bankrupt, and went to Texas to try to sell a guy's watermelon field to get enough money to plant another crop, and got lucky. Short story, made the crop up, and I was totally broke. Actually, that's when I started talking to my wife. I was so lonely out in Pecos, Texas. I would call her every night, and I'd actually fall asleep on the phone while I was talking to her, only because it was a long, exhausting day. And she was working for me at the store there. Well, I scraped enough money in Texas to come back and plant cucumbers. And I planted the cucumbers up in Punta Gorda because I couldn't afford the expensive land that was down here around the Mockley Homestead area where everybody would normally grow cucumbers in the wintertime, because you almost have to be a moron to grow cucumbers up there in Punta Gorda, because it gets too cold up there and it freezes. Well, this particular year, and this was, again, looking back now, is total ignorance of my 24-year-old self, but we had the hurricanes come through and wiped out Homestead, and as I did great up there and made about $400,000 or $500,000 off that crop, and I called my uncle. My uncle was the smartest guy in business that I knew. And if anybody, if you've been around this area for a long time, if you head out to Sanibel Island and McGregor and John Morris, that's my uncle's little store there. It's actually called Oakes Brothers Produce. My dad and him opened it up, but he kicked my dad out after the first 6 months. And it was his place for about 30 years until he passed away. But he was the smartest guy that I knew at the time. He had about 5 employees, and he always had money in the back of his trunk. When you open up his trunk, he's loaded up with cash. He was a smart businessman. So I asked him, I said, Uncle Mitch, I made this money in this farm, what should I do? Because I was 24 years old, and I thought it would be really cool to have an orange grove back then. I was gonna kind of seemed cool to me. I'd get a jacked up 4-wheel drive truck, drive around, automated, not really work that hard. And I said, or I could do a retail market. And my uncle told me, he said, Junior, he says, first off, you haven't realized by now, he says, you ain't no effing farmer, is what he said. And he said, do what you know how to do. He said, sell retail. I've always had retail, was in my blood. And he said, if you want to get rich, go down to Naples and sell to the rich people, is what he told me. So I bought the store where on Davis Boulevard, much smaller then, but I bought that store. My father actually had a roadside store, like an open air cheeky hut down the road, and we merged together for about 2 years together, and then he went off doing his organic thing. But I went off topic there. I do that all the time. But we're blessed to be here in Southwest Florida, in the great free state of Florida. I see Byron Donald's over here. Byron Donald's a great man.
Look at that, 2 minutes left on time.
Byron Donald's showed so much, has always through all of this, but it showed so much integrity back when the BLM came after me. And I asked him kind of a tough thing to do. I asked him to come to the federal courthouse and to stand with me while I, on camera, because there's going to be news media there, asked him why I basically put this $50 million lawsuit into the Lee County schools. And I didn't know if he would do it because his wife Erica actually kind of needs a little bit of favor from the school boards with the work that she's doing with the charter schools, and I would have understood if he didn't want to do it, but I put a little pressure on him, say it's the right thing to do, and I wasn't sure, but he was right there. He was on board. He was right there with me. Now, you never know it if you watch the fake news media because they cut him out of the picture. I got the real news, and we put it out there with Byron standing by my side and my lawyer there, because Byron knew that this Black Lives Matter, as I did, and all of you here knew it was nonsense. They knew it was an attack on our country. and he did the right thing and stood up. And that's when I knew that Byron was the guy that I was going to be behind, and that we were, and it was a tough race. It was a tough race. There was a lot of candidates in there. He had to work hard, and we're very proud to support him. And got to go back to the school boards. We are awake right now. That's the blessing that's what when we down that rabbit hole, we're talking about mistakes. The mistakes that even our fellow Republicans made by not standing up bold, if things really work out, could serve us well. Because I think that even though there's a lot of states that are corrupt right now, that don't have their election integrity intact yet, that we're still going to have a massive red wave here, because it's only those, if we're going to have the presidential election this year, I think we might be in trouble. But I feel confident that we're going to have a red wave, because there's people are awake, and then we still have a lot of work to do. The work's not over. So what's happening in our school boards is amazing. We got some amazing, strong, bold candidates, and it's happening all around the country. And going back to when Byron was standing there with that lawsuit, it's been almost it's been back in June of 2020. So we're already almost 2 years in. And we're kicking their ass bad. I can't tell you about the numbers that they offered me yesterday, because the mediation is, you're not allowed to talk about that. I could get in trouble. So I can just tell you that they made me a sizable financial offer that I told them to kind of stick it up their ass. Because, what I want to do, they violated Florida Sunshine Law. And I don't care, they're picking on me at the wrong time. If they'd have caught me after I went broke when I was 24, I might have took that money. But you give a redneck a lot of money, it's dangerous. But I told them the money doesn't mean anything to me. What I want to do is I want shots to be fired across the country that these school board members cannot operate like this. They cannot cancel. And we have a good federal judge. We have a federal judge that was appointed by Donald Trump, and a lot of these judges in different places kind of side with and believe me, I understand it. I don't want to sue the school. I want the school board's money. I want to take money from the taxpayers. They have a $2 billion budget in Lee County. I could probably run that whole school system for $1 billion, put $1 billion back into the taxpayers' money. And I've said that both ways. I don't think I said that yesterday at mediation. I don't think the school boards are just little microcosms in a lot of ways of the federal government. Just bloated spending, a lot of corruption. I pointed out in my deposition that I pointed out massive corruption within the Lee County School Board, mostly that pertain not to my case, but pertain to maintenance areas, because it's easy to steal out of maintenance. Having 3,500 employees in about 24 different locations, I know that the areas where you have to really watch are maintenance, because there's not really tangible, product that you receive for it. So that's where a lot of theft was going on. We pointed that out in my deposition, because you can't be held liable for things that you say in your deposition, no matter who you throw under the bus there. My lawyer told me about that, so then I used my whole 7 hours of deposition to throw them under the bus. But with that, I would like to take questions, and we can talk about either, a lot of things I like to talk about is health. I like to talk about this whole farm insanity. One last thing before we go to Q&A. There's things that don't make sense with the farm inputs right now. For instance, there's plastic mulch that we use, that we put 3 rolls out per acre. It keeps the moisture in the ground. That always has followed the barrel oil market. It's odd, it runs about $10 higher than a barrel of oil. And last year, we had a decent year. I bought a head. I bought about $4.5 million worth of plastic a head. It's one of the only commodities I bought. I bought seed and plastic. Because seed, I thought there might be a shortage, because there's a lot of labor involved in that. With the COVID, I bought a head. The other thing was the plastic, because I thought that with Sleepy Joe in there, Brandon, that the oil prices were likely to go up, and then I would save some money on plastic. So I bought all this plastic ahead, about $4.5 million worth, and I bought it for $85 a roll, thinking that it's probably going to go like it did last time we saw barrel prices of oil go up to this, about $115, $125, still a great investment. Well, guess how much plastic is right now? It didn't follow the barrel price. It's about $320 a roll. Yeah. And there's no logical sense to it. The wood stakes, the wood market went up, but the guys that are selling trees, they're not getting more money for their trees. The chicken farmers aren't getting more money for their chickens. The beef farmers aren't getting more money for their beef, but the beef prices are 400% up. The tomato steaks are 400% up. The chicken is 400% up. The eggs are 400% up. It doesn't make sense. It's not. This is not following inflation. It's an attack on our food supply. And I've not got to the bottom of all of it, but there's a lot of manipulation going on. And I think that, you know, the way that you control people is you control the food. And the only way that we're going to reverse this, we have to have the red wave and stop this insanity from going on. We got to get bold people in there. We got to get bold people. So I'm going to close this part of what I'm speaking on, and I do feel super optimistic about where we're going. I feel like America's awake now. The red wave is going to be just when we have that, we can't congratulate ourselves and say, yeah, we made it. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of taking our country back. So everyone out here has a unique talent, and no matter what it is. Some people might have a lot of money. I've said it here at the last Republicans elections that I did. If you have a bunch of money in the bank that you're going to leave for your children or grandchildren, if you don't take a piece of that out and put it in the right places right now, it's not going to be worth anything. So you have to take that money and invest it wisely. I'm not saying you take it all out, but think wisely. Take a portion of that and do your homework. Get behind real, solid candidates. The candidates we've been voting for in the past that have this great name recognition, a lot of times they're the wrong people. If they have all that money behind them, they're typically going to be the wrong people. If they have tons of TV ads, I'm not a big fan of a guy that's going to be running for the ad commissioner named Wilton Simpson. I watched his ad that he put together at the RPOF last week, and almost everything in it that I saw was not true in his ad. So you have to be really careful about who it is that you're going to get behind, because a lot, I don't think I have to tell anyone here, a lot of what you see on the TV is BS, right? And that includes the political ads. So do your homework, dig into the candidate, make sure that they're bold, make sure that they're going to stand up like Byron Donalds did. I'm ready for questions if we'll take some questions.